Thank you for calling Wildbird.
Our sole mission is to rescue, rehab, and release. I mean, that's the goal. They can't take care of themselves, so our whole reason for being here is to rescue them, rehab, and release them. I mean, that's where they belong. And they can't do their job and do their part if they're not back out in the wild. You know, and when you start looking at the extinction of some of these birds and what they symbolize and then what they add to our world, it just, again, reminds you that, you know, everything is pretty precious.
When people think about natural resources, they think of things that may not be living. They don't think about the animals. Birds are such an important part of our ecosystem, and so if I can educate even just one person about birds and their importance, then it makes a huge difference.
We have field trips that come here from 21 different counties. So we get to bring the birds out and they get to see the birds firsthand. You know, a lot of people will see the birds in the wild, but you know, how often do you get to get right up next to a great horned owl or a red-tailed hawk?
Most people have never seen a bird up close like that before. And, you know, somebody seeing that bird up close can be the difference between them not caring about birds at all and going, wow, this is amazing, this is interesting, this is cool. I like birds. I would like to help them. I would like to feed them. It's very difficult to, you know, instill that kind of passion in people without them.
We do a lot of events with schools. We'll come out and bring our birds out and educate them about all the different birds that we have in our care, all of their stories, how they got here, what we do with them, how we care for them. We are trying to encourage them to learn more about our natural resources, I would say, and to understand that everything that we do has an impact on our environment. And I think that's one of the funnest parts.
It's very rewarding when you get out and you get to see these kids see some of these creatures, and they're beautiful, you know, firsthand and up close, and then see the light bulbs go off and, you know, above them when they're sitting here understanding how important they are to our environment. Those stories about our education birds that are success stories and that we have interaction with the kids is just wonderful. And people come out here on their visits and they say, I want to see this bird, I want to house this bird. Are they still here? So that's when you know that you've made some sort of impact, when they remember the birds and they want to come back and see them year after year. When the kids come through and do their trips and stuff, I ask all of them, do y'all have a younger brother or sister? And of course, most of them hold up their hand and say, yes, they do. And then I tell them, well, Archie's like your 2-year-old brother or sister. He gets into everything. He likes to make a mess, tear everything up, play with everything. Archie's one that came to us that somebody had kept as a pet, which, you know, you're not supposed to do. They're protected species. And Archie has a personality of his own. And, you know, people talk about how crows are smart, and he's no exception. When he first came in, he liked to be with people because he had that interaction. And so he would always hang out and just fly around on the inside. And then we started noticing that he was coming in and he was taking money. And so we had to start shutting the door because he was shredding. He would take the shiny coins, but he liked to take the dollar bills for whatever reason. People leave donations and he would shred them. And about the second or third time I went to the bank with a shredded dollar bill, he said, hey, we can't keep taking these like this. So we decided we would have to keep Archie out of the office. But he's one of these that just has a personality of his own. But it also shows you, how resilient, how smart these animals are.
Recently, within the past couple of years, they have enacted the Animal Welfare Act to cover birds.
They're an indicator of biodiversity. So if you have lots of birds, it basically tells you like, hey, this ecosystem's doing okay. There's lots of things, that are working, so they're able to, survive and reproduce and have lots of babies and over time separate.
I mean, you have everything from tiny little hummingbirds that pollinate all the way up to huge raptors that, clean up carcasses from the highway, who catch, dozens of mice. We've got this little owl over here. He could pack down up to a dozen himself, not including his parents, just the baby.
Owls and hawks will live in a 10-mile radius from where they're born. They don't typically move. So anytime you have new construction, or you have, new things like that, or there's a drought, or there's anything like that, of course that affects everything. People throw plastic away, and they throw things away that aren't biodegradable. And so, when you get styrofoam cups, and trash and stuff like that, the animals don't understand that that's what it is.
If you could imagine if all the hawks and owls disappeared right now, how many rodents we would have. Not that rodents aren't also important, but everything has to be in a balance.
If we didn't have these birds, what's around your house, or what's in your neighborhood? Of course, they start saying stuff like insects or snakes or stuff like that. And of course, you have to say, well, if the birds weren't here, then what would happen? And it gets them to thinking. So, obviously, they play a very integral part in our ecosystem.
You wouldn't even want to imagine what it would be like without birds. He was found on the ground. He could not fly. Our best guess is at some point he injured that eye. And then basically because he couldn't see very well while it was healing, he couldn't hunt very well. So his weight dropped because he couldn't find food, even though the eye itself was healing. It kind of moved, conversely, weight going down, eye getting better, it could not stabilize out. And so a rescuer found him, captured him, I went and picked him up. And so basically his eyes just continued to get better. He's been putting on weight, eating very well. And so we're hoping for a full recovery with him.
Texas Parks and Wildlife and rehabilitation in general, they want records of everything. So any bird that comes in, as soon as they come in, we have the finder fill out paperwork and we make a cage card for the bird. That cage card is basically that bird's identity to us, and it follows that bird everywhere. So we bring them in, let them rest for at least 30 minutes, somewhere dark, warm, and quiet. That's because a lot of the birds that we see become very, very stressed during capture. And some of those birds can get so stressed that they are actually at risk of dying. And then we will give them a physical exam. We go from beak to tail feathers and toes, complete exam of the bird. We want to see everything on that bird. Does it have any breaks? Does it have any lesions? Does it have missing feathers? We will hydrate them over a period of time. Once they're well hydrated and we know that they're functioning well, we can start the refeeding process of the birds.
Obviously, when you're dealing with adults and children and men and stuff and women, they have the ability to express what's wrong with them and talk to you and tell you what's bothering them. But with these animals, sometimes they'll come in and you don't know.
We have our standard things that happen day to day, but we also see a lot of really difficult cases that come in, and it happens pretty often. Sometimes we get birds that come in just such rough shape that the kindest thing for us to do is to help them pass on peacefully in a safe and warm environment.
Having to play God in a sense and look at a bird and say, okay, is this bird salvageable or not? And having to not only make that decision, but to do that act yourself. It's not something that a lot of people can do because it's tough.
That is one of the first things that I experienced when I started volunteering up here. Literally, first day here, a goose came in that had a really old injury, unable to fly. It was infected, and we got to do that. It's something that, we're in charge of. It's something that we're entrusted to be able to do.
Having to make that decision whether a bird can live or die. Having to look at their quality of life, whether they would even be able to live.
It's just a really difficult job that needs to be done sometimes.
You should know people are watching. The birds that we do have that are education birds, ambassador birds, they can't take care of themselves, so we're permitted by the state to take care of them.
Them staying with us means they get to have a life. They're practically my children. You know, when I'm not here, I worry about them. You know, we've got, you know, several with different, you know, conditions.
Comet is a Mississippi kite. He came to us in July of 2023 as an older nestling that had fallen from his nest that caused the eye injury that Comet is dealing with. And when he came in, he had a head tick that we associated with the head trauma. He started having what we thought were seizures. The next day, Rebecca called me and said I needed to get up here and see what was going on with Comet. So I get up here and he's having one of his episodes in his crate, and so I just pulled him out. I held him really securely, and I just tried to give his body time to work through this. We found out a week later he actually has West Nile virus. There were a lot of conversations of, is he going to recover? What quality of life is he going to live? What are we going to do with him? He ended up doing really, really well. He's responded to his medications. He's made a huge turnaround. I have done a lot for this little bird, and I will continue to advocate for any of our birds and make sure they get the care that they need. We took in 1,054 birds throughout the year last year. That's a lot of birds, and that's a lot of birds that are in every one of these incubators, filling up this room, the other rooms, and the infirmary.
And all of that, it takes money. So, you know, as long as we can get out and we can promote that message and continue to receive the funds to help us expand this facility and to take care of the birds, that's what I foresee us doing.
We don't get anything from the city. We don't get anything from the state. It is all donations and grants, whether it's paper towels, gloves, syringes. I mean, it's all donations.
Wild Bird relies very heavily on the community. In more ways than one. We also rely on people wanting to show up, wanting to volunteer, just having people who want to be engaged and want to be involved and want to help take care of these birds with us.
Our goal is to rescue and rehabilitate as many birds as possible and put them back into the wild. Getting to do that final step. You've fed the bird, you've bandaged it, you've medicated it, you've done all this, that, and the other thing. And then you finally get to that moment where you get to go out and take the cage and open it and watch them leave. It was beautiful. And it was perfect too, because we found this park where we could release him at the top of a hill, so he was able to fly straight out of the crate, and he went up and he circled above us, and then he went and landed on a tree so we could watch him for a while, and then he took off and he went you know, into the drafts, you know, drafted off the wind, and he basically circled and circled and circled until he was so small we couldn't see him anymore. I have cried many times over it. It's just, it's so wonderful. It's great, it really is.